Boom! There we go. Hello, everyone. This is Justin, and I'm joined with Dennis. Thanks for coming on the show. Welcome.
Wah, wah, wah. Golly, couldn't sound like more appealing.
Hey,
Hey,
Inner Circle, if you would like to hop on our live tonight with us, like through Zoom, check on the Inner Circle Facebook page because I posted a link. And if you want to hop on with us and join in our conversation this evening, there you go. It's right there. Check it out. But please don't
yeah,
share
you
it with
can tell
anyone
us
unless
what
they're
we,
Inner Circle.
yes. And you can tell us what we were supposed to talk about tonight that we said we were going to wait until this week to talk
I'm
about.
pretty
So
sure it
we
was.
wouldn't.
I think it was dues. I think we kind of got on the tangent about dues, and we're like, no, 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 hold on, we won't get on that tangent yet. And so
Right,
we're like, we'll
right.
talk about it on the next live. It was probably dues because we hadn't talked about dues in a while. So
I think you're right.
I think so.
And that should be brought up at least once a year.
Yeah.
It really should.
All right. We got Austin Berry. Welcome, Austin. Dave Yance is here. Welcome, Dave. Good seeing you Saturday. Um, David McLean is here. David Lawson. I met David the other day. That was really cool.
Nice.
Yeah, yeah. Um, Devin McLean. I met him too. I met him also
Devin
at
McLean.
Faith.
Yep.
Yeah, he's the new EA, or he's a fellowcraft now over at Faith.
Nice.
He came on our show and got hooked up with the Faith guys, the Faith Lodge guys. So
Yep.
it was
I
pretty cool
remember.
seeing that.
That is cool. Seeing it go
Most definitely,
go go mostly full circle.
mostly full circle.
Mostly full circle.
All right, so just as a reminder, I posted a link to this Zoom meeting on the Inner Circle Facebook group. So if you're in the Inner Circle, hop on the group there, and there's the link. If you're not in the group and you are Inner Circle, if you send a request
Let
to
us know.
join, yeah, we'll get you hooked up.
Yeah, let one of us know and we can get you going.
Yep. I understand, Dave. Good seeing you, then. So we would
So
go ahead.
go ahead. Go ahead.
No, you go
I'll
ahead.
be right back. Go
No,
ahead.
you go ahead.
No, you introduce.
Uh,
Do 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 do's. Do do
do
do
do do
do's.
do's.
How's that?
That sounds like something we would do for sure. Tonight's conversation, we need to have the dues talk. I think we Dennis and I
Ooh.
we kind of hit it on it in one of our last either it was on our Zoom or one of our recordings, and we're like, no, 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 we do want to focus on whatever we're talking about right now, and so we put it off, but it seems like it's time.
Wah, wah,
It seems like
wah.
it's time. We should
As
have that
usual.
conversation. Yep. So we're here to talk about dues. I keep hearing my children
We
in the
all
background, so I apologize if I get kind of
we all gotta pay our dues.
yeah. No, no, no,
I
no.
tell you what, I was
Hey,
I was
I'll be right back. Got kid stuff
okay,
going
so
on.
let me jump into this. So, what brings the topic of dues up is that last week we were discussing changing the bylaws, rules, and regulations, and we touched on it briefly, and then we did a video on Wednesday in depth on on that, which really doesn't take a whole lot of time because if you when you go to update your bylaws, if you have not changed to the Form 23, then you actually it's a long process, and you have to well it's more than just a long process. You have to get the idea and then present it, get the motion to present at one lodge meeting, and then after that lodge meeting is done, then what happens is you're supposed to send letters to all your members of your lodge and then vote on it the following meeting for bylaws. Um, then you have to mail in your bylaws to Grand Lodge to get approval for them to be accepted. Now, it's not approval as to if it's okay for you to change your date to a different date or a different time or whatever, but the approval situation is basically approving if it's in proper form, if it's in proper form to be written, because bylaws are a, a mandate for us to keep our charters and to keep our 501c10 status attached to Grand Lodge's 501c3. And so those have to be done, and they have to be in proper form to meet certain federal guidelines. So that's why they have to look at it. But they've created this form 23, which is a standardized form that's already pre-approved because they wrote it, and then you just fill in the blanks. So we were talking about that, and it's real easy to change your bylaws to the form 23 just by filling out the form 23 and then sending it in. And from that point on, you are on form 23, and it doesn't require extra approval or anything like that. They just accept it, upload it into their database, and you're done. The reason why, because they've already written out all the things that are necessary to meet the guidelines, the federal guidelines that we have to meet. So all you're doing is filling in the blanks. And then otherwise, you put things in your rules and regulations or standard operating procedures, whatever you want to call them for your lodge. But you basically create your rules and regulations, and you can vote on that one time in your lodge in one meeting. You don't have to have a carryover. You don't have to do any of that stuff. You just take it to the meeting, vote on it, and then it becomes part of your rules and regulations. Mm-hmm. So the bylaws still have to be done through that process. Even if you're on Form 23, if you're changing the actual spaces in the Form 23, you have to send it to Grand Lodge. But the rules and regulations are for your lodge. You don't have to do anything but vote on them, and they become active right away. So with that being said, we started talking about different things that you would need to that would be important to have in your bylaws, and then things that would be important to have in your rules and regulations.
Yep.
And we believe that your dues should be in your rules and regulations, because that should be something that you can change at any given point in time without a bunch of hoopla and a bunch of people coming in to filibuster your attempt to increase the viability of your lodge, right? So we talked about that being important to be in the rules and regulations. So for that very reason, is there anything you would like to add to that I didn't touch on?
Yeah. So
that's just a brief summary of what we talked about.
Yeah. No. So just to kind of recap, like a lot of the lodges still have their dues and their bylaws, and that's a huge hassle. Like if you ever need to change your dues or anything like that, a lot of lodges keep it that way intentionally because they're paranoid that, say like it's January, right? And you're gonna have Grand Lodge in like 3 days, and no one's gonna show up to your stated meeting. They're paranoid. Well, hey, these guys could still meet. It's their stated meeting. They could have 3 guys that they could vote to raise dues when no one's there. Technically, that's true, but you don't have to have your dues and your bylaws, and it kind of prevents you from actually being able to do what you need to do with your dues. So if you put them in your rules and regulations or your standard operating procedures or whatever you want to call them instead, then you have more flexibility and more control over your dues without having to submit like a bylaws change every time you want to do it. And if the lodge is paranoid of like, hey, I don't want someone just meeting when no one's showing up, like a stated meeting where no one's showing up and voting for something like that, or you don't want people like voting every other month to try to raise dues, then just put that in your SOPs saying, hey, we're only going to vote once a year to raise dues, and whatever happens, that's what it is for the year. So pass or fail, no changes after 6 months or a year or whatever you want to go with. What's up, Cesar Rubio? Good to have you, brother.
Well, in fact, with what you just stated, that would be something that you would probably want in your bylaws, that you would actually hold an election or a vote every year at let's say right after the new master comes in or whatever, that's when he will form a committee, and you would put that in the bylaws. So you would say the master would form a committee, and the committee would come with recommendations to the uh, bylaws, rules, and regulations, and then we would act upon it as such on said month. Mm-hmm. So you can say, this is the month we vote. So no matter what, if people are worried about that, they know that this is the month you vote on the dues. And so that you could have that in the bylaws, but then the actual raising of the dues, the change would go in the rules and regulations. And so you would put that in the bylaws that you vote this specific month, but the rules and regulations will be the ruling guide to the dues. Gotcha. So that way you have that flexibility, but it's still, you can guarantee your time and protect the integrity of the vote by doing something like that. I think that would be a good compromise for the people that are paranoid. Yeah. But to be honest with you, I'm going to say, if you have concerns like that in your lodge, you got bigger problems in your lodge than just the dues and when you vote and stuff like that. You need to get your house in order first. Yeah. That's the most important thing, because if you're not working together with a unified culture, your lodge is never going to be successful anyways. No matter what you raise your dues to, no matter what you change things to, if you don't have cohesiveness in your lodge, you need to figure out how to get that.
Speaking facts,
that's first and foremost.
I agree wholeheartedly. But anyway, let's talk more about dues. Let's go into details.
And then after that, we can also, I think, because it ties into it, we ought to also add on the degree fees.
Oh yeah, let's go into
because that's something else. Yeah, that's something else you'd want to have in there. So go ahead and address both of them at the same time. Go ahead.
Sure. There's a lot of lodges and they're struggling financially, and one of the biggest issues is that they haven't looked at their dues structure in who knows how long. Or they looked at it and they weren't I hate to say the word aggressive, but they didn't push hard enough for what they needed to be. We'll say that. And why I say that is because we love peace and harmony, right? And there's no way to disrupt peace and harmony faster than talking about money with Freemasons for whatever reason. And it's always contentious. It's always an issue. But the problem is that we have kicked that can down the road so many times in so many lodges for such a long time that the dues have been stagnant or have barely moved for 10, 20, 30 years. And now it's way past time. Like it's almost a sense of urgency. It's so they try to raise dues and everyone gets all up in arms. So you compromise and just do like less than half of what you wanted, or $10 or something like that, and it needs to be much more than what it ends up being. You're never going to catch up by compromising on your dues. You can't, and I said this before, you can't fish fry your lodge into prosperity. It just can't happen. Right. Or I mean, you could fish fry, you could do fish fries and raffles and sling barbecue and all these other things. And yeah, you could bring a lot of money into your fraternity, but now you're not practicing Freemasonry because you're so busy raising money and trying to right. give it away and do all these things. You totally lost track of what the whole point of Freemasonry even is. So it's high past time in a lot of lodges to really raise those dues. And do you have anything you want to add before I go into like how to figure it?
Yeah, I would like to state from personal experience that in my year as master, we voted to raise the dues, and I was not aggressive, thinking that we would do it every year from that point on. We would make sure and look at it, and it didn't happen. It hasn't raised again since. So now the burden is on the up and coming officers of the lodge to try to right some wrongs. And the bad thing about that is that these young guys are onto something, man. They've really got something good going on in our lodge. but because the can was kicked down the road too often, now these guys are going to have a burden that when they do the dues, when they bring up the dues, then they're going to have that burden interfering with anything else they want to do, because it's going to have to be so high to make it actually worthwhile. Mm-hmm. So if you're in that position, well, go ahead and talk about how to determine the dues first, and then I'll add on to what I was going to say.
I want to answer this question before we move into that. So it's David Lawson. And good seeing you the other day, David. And he says, so our bylaws just state our dues will meet the minimum per Grand Lodge law, but can be adjusted from time to time as needed. So we have changed the amount from time to time without a bylaws change. It sounds like we have not been doing it correctly by not amending the bylaws.
Well, no. If you'll look on your Grandview, David, look at go to your lodge and look and see if your bylaws are in there, and when you open that up, because it can be uploaded by the secretary. So when you open that up,
what's up, Josh?
Look at your
hey, how's it going?
Look at the top of that form, and you're going to notice if it's the Form 23 or not, which is a standardized form that Grand Lodge made. If that's the case, then you may already have your dues in the rules and regulations. And so if it's in the rules and regulations, it's a lot easier to change than with it being in the bylaws. But you can change the bylaws to reflect what we were talking about earlier, as far as setting a month for this is when we change dues. So if that'll ever be a concern to you, you better show up in this month to vote, because this is when we're going to vote each year. But it really depends on how yours is written. Let me know if yours looks like the old standardized legal form bylaws, or if it's a fill in the blank piece of paper. Yeah. That's how you'll know. Yeah. If it's the fill in the blank, then you do have the provision already for your rules and regulations. By having that Form 23, it automatically creates that need for the rules and regulations, and your dues should be in there.
Where can you find that in Grandview? Where would you find the Form 23 at?
Go to your lodge, where it lists all your lodges, and if you click on the lodge, it will have a drop down, and it will have a section in there that says bylaws. There one of the drop downs is bylaws, and you just click on that, and if your secretary has uploaded it, it'll be in there, and you'll be able to tell.
Gotcha.
A couple of my lodges have bylaws. A couple of my lodges have Form 23. One of them does not have them uploaded, and it's very disappointing, because it's one that I've been bragging on for the past 6 months on how badass this lodge is, doing all the right things, and then I go to look and it's not there. It's like, oh my gosh.
So David says they have no rules and regulations. What I would probably recommend is get the Form 23, pull up your bylaws, and see what you really have in your bylaws that you feel like you have to have, and transition over to Form 23. Get that done before anything else. And
just fill in the blanks.
And frankly, me personally, if you don't have to mention your bylaws, me personally, I'd say don't put it in there. Don't put your bylaws
in rules and regulations.
Unless you have to. Once you have
Dennis, ours is a Form 23. I just looked.
Oh, did they upload it?
No, but Mike sent them to me the other day. I got both the bylaws and the rules and regulations.
Right. Nice. So those need to be uploaded. Rusty needs to upload them as the secretary. He's the one that needs to upload them. Email them to me.
And I would also say, once you have your bylaws done, right? And that's a process. You have to lay it over and vote and all that. Then look at your rules and regulations. And I have looked at it personally, but Kyle Walquest said he uploaded something to the Accepted to help people get their rules and regulations where they need to be.
For Resolution 9.
Just for Resolution 9? Okay.
Yes.
So We need to find like a good example template of the rules and regulations that people could just use as a guideline. Did you look the one I sent you? It was pretty bad.
But, yeah, that's not going to be an example.
Yeah, but
I can grab ours and make it generic. I
Yeah,
was
if you
going to
could do
do
that.
that, but I looked and they weren't there, and so it's like some bitch.
Okay, yeah, if you could do that, and make it just generic, and then at least you'll have some rules and regulations that we can say here.
Right.
Here's a guideline. Here's an idea.
Right.
But just get your, if you don't have the bylaws where they need to be, get that first. And a lot of people don't use the 23. They created their bylaws 20 years ago, 30 years ago, and it has hardly changed at all, except for maybe changing your dues. And it's not, it doesn't look like anything like Form 23. So if you haven't done that, I would probably do that first. That way you have something that is consistent with what a lot of other lodges are using. You just go that direction.
Well, it actually gives your lodge the freedom that it deserves.
Yeah.
You know, it's given the power back to the lodge that you get to decide when you want to decide on what you're going to do.
Mm-hmm.
So you have the basic stuff that meets the government standards, and then the rules and regulations are all the added stuff that your lodge wants to put on there that defines the culture of the lodge, pretty much.
Yep.
And that's why it's so important that everybody move to that platform. And if people are, like we talked about earlier, if they're holding on to their old bylaws and keeping the dues in the bylaws so that people can't sneak in a change or something like that, then you got bigger problems. You need to solve that problem of distrust in the lodge before you
Well, I know of one lodge in particular where the roof is literally falling in, and they're afraid that people might try to sneak about a dues increase into the lodge. So, but you're right, they do have way bigger problems.
That's just pathetic, man.
I know.
It's just pathetic.
But as far as like actually calculating your dues, let's say you got everything where it needs to be as far as the paperwork goes, and you want to figure out what your dues need to be. What I'm about to tell you is like the bare minimum. What you need to do is you need to look at your operating cost for the last, pick between 3 to 5 years, and look at what the operating cost has been, and once you get that number, you're going to look at how many dues paying members you have, and then you're going to divide your operating cost by your dues paying members by that number.
Yeah.
And that will tell you
Not your endowments.
Yeah, not your endowments. Your dues.
Your endowment should
members.
be fluff.
And that number that you get will tell you what your minimum should be for your dues. But all that will do is, if everything remains as it is, all that will do is just cover your operating costs. Like, your lodge is not making any money. And it's okay for your lodge to have money. In fact, it should have money. That way,
Yes.
you can actually, I mean, how's your lodge supposed to help your brothers if you have no money? Right?
Yeah.
But beautify your building, make it nice, start making improvements. You need to go past your minimum. And for some lodges, it's expensive. It is. And sorry. What were we going to say, Dennis?
There's a misconception about nonprofits, and we still call, in some states it's still called nonprofits. In some states it's called not for profit, and we should think about that as our lodge. Mm-hmm. It's not for profit, right? So our goal isn't to we're not in business just to make profit. If we were, we'd be a corporation, we would pay taxes, we would do all that stuff. But a nonprofit puts this mental image that you're not allowed to have any money. But a not-for-profit just means that. It means that you're not doing it for profit. What the money that you make is put away to secure your lodge for an extended amount of time. Mm-hmm. So it's okay to make that money and to stash it away and to spend it on your building and to do all the things that's necessary. It's okay. You don't have to use it all on, blow it all on different charities and things like that. Well, in fact, you shouldn't.
The lodge.
If you're not taking care of your members, then you're not. That's not the charity that we were intended to do in the first place.
The lodge is a charity, and I don't mean like it's a charity or charitable organization that is intended only for taking money in and dishing it back out. It's not intended for redistributing money The lodge itself is a charity, right? That means if I want to write a check to a charity, put my Masonic Lodge, send it there, that's a charity.
Right.
And so this idea that a lodge shouldn't have money is silly. What good is a charity with no money, right?
Well, we made a decision in my house, and some people may get upset over this. A lot of people will probably get upset in our Bible Belt piece of the world, but we made a decision that in the Bible it states to give your first 10% to God, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, if your lodge is doing what you're supposed to be doing, and you're making a positive impact on your community, that's God's work, man. That's God's work. So instead of giving $10,000 to my church every year, I put $10,000 into Freemasonry every year. And it is what it is.
Mm-hmm.
I think that we do good work. I think that my church doesn't have a children's hospital that needs to be supported, or actually several children's hospitals that need to be supported, along with dyslexia schools for learning and autism schools for learning. My church doesn't have that. They give money to somebody in Africa who, I don't need to convert them. What I need to do is support the things that are important to me.
Yeah. If you go to church and you drop $20 in the donation every week, you're paying the church more than you pay your lodge dues, right? But nobody's saying, well, church isn't a business; it shouldn't have money, right?
Right.
It's an organization intended to help people, and
they love that
lodges
brand
did
new.
not get where they are today, right? We wouldn't have beautiful buildings, these stupendous edifices, if you didn't have brothers 100 years ago that said, hey, I'm going to donate extra money to this to help beautify and make this something special because this is important to me. So
What's really interesting?
What?
Our charter member, Josh, and my charter member, Hillier, was also the founder of our church. So not only did he build up our lodge, not only did he create that building with a few good men, but he created the church, the First Baptist Church, that has been one of the largest churches in Goliad for umpteen years.
Nice.
So these guys came in and they didn't just, sink all their money into entertainment. They spent their money on their churches. They spent their money on their schools. They spent their money on their lodge, and not necessarily in that order. A lot of times it was the lodge first because everything else evolved around that lodge.
So let's go back to
we're missing the boat.
Let's go back to the finances, because I want to point out, when you're talking about amounts, there's a lodge, and I won't name it, but they charge $1 a day to be a Freemason. It's $1 a day, and they made the decision some years ago, like, hey, things aren't going well. We need to get ourselves in a financial position. We're going to change the culture of our lodge, where Freemasonry here costs $1 a day. If you're not getting at least $1 a day worth of Freemasonry value, then go somewhere else. And apparently, that decision, it caused some people left over it, but the lodge is healthier now than it's ever been. And sometimes, unfortunately, you have to tear things down a little bit before you can rebuild. Sometimes people will they'll get pissy and they'll leave, and that's fine. If they don't find the value in Freemasonry that you're trying to put it at, then they'll go where they find the value. And unfortunately, usually for them, it's not much. So just keep that in mind. Like $365, that's what, me personally, I think that's a healthy minimum for a lodge. $1 a day.
That's what they ask you to give to dogs and cats on public broadcast, man. Yes. Well, seriously.
Wow.
Man, Jerry's kids did it for 30 years. They asked for $1 in the 70s.
Yeah.
And then, they get I can't remember her name, that singer. I can't remember her name. She always gets on there and asks you to give to to the animal shelters and this and that.
Yeah.
Sarah
Come
McLaughlin.
on.
Sarah McLaughlin.
Yes.
Yeah. So something else
I love those infomercials.
that you really have to consider, and timeliness is a factor on this because this is something that's in your bylaws, and that's your endowments. If my endowments are $500, and we do the math, and we get a bunch of like-minded guys, and we say, okay, we really gotta push to raise the dues to $400 to be where we need to be at a minimum. Well, a lot of guys are going to look at $400 a year versus a $500 one-time endowment, and they're going to go over this way,
Right.
And suddenly those numbers you crunch don't make sense anymore because 10 of those guys are now not dues-paying members; they're endowed.
That's usually what happens.
Yeah. And so there's two ways you can look at it. First thing is you can say we're going to raise our endowments first, based off what we want to raise our dues to, and I'll get to that math in a minute if you want to. And then you say that way what you're doing is you're preventing them from jumping ship before you do anything. Or you could say, hey, we're going to raise dues and we need to raise endowments, but we can't because you can only raise endowments in June, like around election officer period, and it's a bylaws change. So you could say we're going to raise it. We're going to have to push to raise endowments in June. Here it is, January or February. We'll say it's February right now, and we need to raise our dues to $400. That means you have a little grace period if you want to endow. But understand, in June we're going to raise our endowments proportionate to our degree fees. And the reason you might do that is because
Your
there's
endowments to your degree fees or your dues?
Your dues. I'm sorry.
Degree fees should be completely.
I know.
Yeah.
I know. You're gonna raise it proportional to your dues, and the reason you might do that is because you're always going to have these guys like, oh, fixed income. Oh, people are going to run off. Well, then you can say, okay, look, you have this grace period. If you're that concerned, you're going to be cheating and wronging and defrauding your lodge. But if you're that concerned, you have this period where you can endow. So, you could sleep at night better or whatever, and then after that, you can raise your endowments. As far as endowment costs, we've covered entire videos over this, so I'm not going to go like too deep into the endowments, but basically it needs to be about 20 times your dues. You could say, well, so 20 times your dues. And if you want to know the specifics like the math why, check out the videos over endowments, because that math hasn't really changed. You could get by and say, well, if we just do 10 times our dues, no one's going to do it, and you're probably right. There's a certain level, a certain threshold where people aren't really going to be inclined to do it anyway. I'm just saying mathematically, if you want it to make the most sense, 20 times your dues.
Well, and that's the goal, though, isn't it? I mean, you really want to make it uncomfortable, because if it's easy and comfortable, then they're doing it for themselves. If it's uncomfortable, then they're actually thinking about using it as an opportunity to contribute to the lodge as well as getting the benefit for yourself. So if you're 15, 20 times more than your dues, then that would actually be something that's giving more to your lodge than you're taking.
Well, I mean, if you do $400, say your dues are $500, right? 20 times 500, that's $10,000 right there. So if you just say we're just going to do 10, that's 5,000. Most people still aren't going to do that either, right? And it's not to make it so high that nobody wants to do it. The point is to make it high enough that if someone does endow, you're still getting that same amount of money back every. And you could say, well, it's supposed to be perpetual. It's supposed to be like a gift to the lodge. Well, sure. But if you set your dues at a certain rate, that means that's what I need from this member, correct? If it's anything less than that, then you're kind of shooting yourself in the foot. Mark P says we increased our endowment to 2K and not had a member endow since. Yeah, I mean there's a certain threshold where nobody's going to do it, and you could probably get away with 2K or 3K or 4K, and no one's going to endow. I mean, and it's not to be clear, it's not to discourage people from endowing. It's to say, look, we set our dues at this rate. because we did the math and we decided, based off our dues paying members, this is what the lodge needs to be viable. With dues, you're getting a certain guarantee return. I believe it's 5%. So 5% of whatever I charge for my dues is what I get back, what the lodge gets back every year. So doing the math, if I do 20 times my dues and I get 5% of that, the return will equal what that guy was paying at that time when he endowed. And really, if you're going to do the math based off the numbers, that means that's what we know that we need as a lodge. So it only makes sense to set your endowments at a rate where if someone does choose to endow, that lodge is getting what it calculated that it needed every year from that guy.
Right.
What are you gonna say?
Well, there's different ways you can also support your lodge if everybody's afraid to increase the endowments. Another thing is every year do a campaign to tell your endowed members to purchase another $100 block in towards their endowment, or you can do a let's say call it a 50-50 campaign, and so ask everybody, okay, let's donate $100 to the lodge.
It's mineral water, by the way. I'm not a
50% of that. 50% of that would go to let's say the building fund, and then 50% of that would collectively purchase endowments towards the founding fathers, or continue to purchase one for every member of the past as you move up the line until you have no more to purchase.
Yep.
All your deceased members from the past, every year have this 50-50 campaign to where you ask for $100 extra from your members. And then in that campaign, 50% of it goes to the lodge building fund immediately. And then 50% will buy however many endowments you can with whatever came in. I'm not saying everybody has to contribute because not everybody can. But out of those who do, you may have $2,000-3,000 in funds to purchase blocks of endowments for all these members that are deceased.
Yep.
So it immediately starts putting back into the fund to support your lodge and its activities. I mean, there's different ways you can really help your lodge. You just have to be creative, and you just have to decide it's time to do it.
So
that's the main thing.
Keep in mind that based off the current law regarding the endowments and the returns, if you buy an extra $100 like a block of endowments for your endowment every year, that's an additional $5 that it gets every year. And it doesn't sound like a lot, but it adds up. If you do it for 10 years, it's an additional $50, right? Or if you have a really good year and buy a few extra, just keep in mind every $100 unit is $5 extra going into that endowment. Dang, you said something else that was really good I wanted to hit on. I totally blanked out though. You want to talk about degree fees?
Well, this is another discussion that we've had in the past, and I've heard people get upset for brothers having ideas that are similar. And I've had people try to claim the ideas that we shared on our show that we never talked to anybody about before. But
these ideas are trademarked.
Yeah, right. Right. So there's research that has been done, and it costs approximately it takes approximately 200 man hours to get a Mr. to Mason. And so if you think about how much time you're putting in, and if you try to put a dollar figure on that time, and sure, you're dealing with a bunch of volunteers, but it's still time. And so if you put a dollar figure on the time that the lodge is putting into that person, then that's what your degree fees should reflect. The idea that we had in the past was, let's say you charge $500 per degree, right? So in the end, it ends up being $1,500. And Josh, if you look at our original bylaws from 1852 and 1854, it was very close to that equivalent for how much the degree fees were for somebody to become a Mason. So let's say you have $500 per degree. So the first 500 you take as an EA, you put that directly into an endowment for the lodge to one of your charter members or to one of your older brothers that are deceased, and that way it immediately starts investing back into the lodge. That second $500, that goes towards the building fund, strictly the building fund, so that you can help maintain and upkeep your buildings. And then the third one, that actually is what's going to pay for all the degrees in the past. So you're loading up to the lodge, you're giving to the lodge in advance, and then you're going to pay it all back at the end. So with that third amount of money, that's where you're going to deduct what it costs you to have meals at all three of those degrees. That's where it costs the different presentation items that you're going to give. You know, all those things would be covered with that $500 plus a little bit extra to give towards the George Washington Memorial Fund and all that kind of good stuff. And God forbid you go out and buy one of the certificates for, you know, becoming a Master Mason. Don't just give them the George Washington certificate, but give them another nice certificate for becoming a Master Mason, and buy them a frame to put it in. Give them a framed certificate as a congratulations, man.
Yeah.
And you could also buy a lapel pin to give to them as a gift. You know, whoever the Grand Master is of that year, have the lapel pin, have the everything together to make it just a top-notch confirmation of the hard work they put in, and then they're receiving a lot more value than what they have for the past 50 years.
Man, when I went through Scottish Rite, and that was pretty recently, I got the really cool ring in the epoxy pyramid. I got a hat. I got some books. Like this ring. I got a certificate in the mail the other day. It's all really cool stuff. But the thing is, these weren't given to me for free. This stuff I paid for, right? It's baked into the cost of the degree fees. We don't do that. We're so guilty of not doing that. We take a loss on these new guys because we're just happy to have them. No, it's a terrible business practice. We should not do anything that costs us money like this. And you could, like you said, you can do the certificates, get them some nice things. Also, Bluff had some really cool stuff 2 years ago when they were there at the pop-up shop. Like shadow boxes for like EAs and Philocrafts and past masters and all kinds of stuff. There's cool stuff out there that you can get. There's like corn, wine, and oil you could buy. They had they had chalk, charcoal, and clay. In like a shadow box, so you could that
was cool.
Yeah, it was cool.
Yeah, I like that.
How meaningful. How impactful to have something like that on your wall to remember your degree. Great conversation piece. As far as like the amounts, so about 200 hours, right? Give or take, depending on the person, but on average, about 200 hours, right?
What's minimum wage, right?
$7.25. So
that's it. I thought it was 10.
No, I was looking, and that's what showed up for me. But so if we divide 200 by 3, that comes out to about 67 man hours per degree. And if you multiply that times the minimum wage, $7.25, that's $485 right there. That's how much time goes into it at minimum wage. And most of us aren't minimum wage.
For what was that calculation? Start over?
Okay. From the very beginning. If you take 200 man hours,
right,
divided by 3 degrees, right? That comes out to about 67 hours per degree.
Right.
And if you multiply that times the minimum wage, It's $485.
Right. That's what I was going to say. Is that it's $1,450 for all 3 degrees. 200 man hours is $1,450.
Yeah.
So that 500 per degree is not far off.
Caesar says it's
That's
$20 an
minimum
hour in
wage.
California. That's the minimum wage.
Yeah. Yeah. So just think about it. We have something in our fraternity that no one else has to offer. And that thing is the experience.
I would also say
that's our value.
before any.
So if
Go ahead.
So if we're not putting into that experience as much as we can, because it's only a one-time experience for each one of them. If we're not putting in everything we can to make that experience meaningful, then we're shortchanging them.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, if they're not paying us for all the emphasis we're putting on them, then they're shortchanging us.
Yep.
A good deal is only a good deal when it's good for both parties, right? And so this is incredibly one-sided, and we're robbing our lodges.
Mm-hmm.
Well, we're robbing both sides, really. We're robbing each other because we're not giving them the experience that they thought they would get, and we're not getting the money that we really need to give that experience. So we're just hurting. It's a chicken and egg situation.
And before anyone starts wringing their hands, because a lot of people do that because they're afraid of high anything really. If you dig into your minutes, go back as far back as you can. The first time they mentioned the degree fees, take that number, go to the inflation calculator online and plug that number in, and it's probably still going to be more than what we're talking about right here.
Right.
So historically, you could say, well, that's not the way we've always done it. No, historically, we did much more.
Right.
History is not in your favor on that argument. So, Bob Naylor says, Dennis, our lodges seldom give candidates and longtime Masons their money's worth. This goes for degree and for the value of membership. It's just not there. Yeah.
You're right. You're right. And that's where we need to change. We need to change that. We don't change for change's sake. We need to change to do better by our brothers,
mm-hmm.
in my opinion.
I think of restaurants because there's a wide variety of restaurants. But sometimes you have these restaurants where they're not necessarily doing anything. Their stuff's good, but they're not necessarily doing anything above and beyond, but they're considered fancy.
Yeah, like Chili's.
Well, yeah, but
like
they're more expensive.
Outback.
Yes.
Yeah, they're all the same.
They're all the same.
All the same.
But they're more expensive, right? Just because they insist they're better. And I'm not saying that we should lie and artificially inflate ourselves, but we do have something that no one else has. We have a product that you can't get anywhere else. You can't get Freemasonry from Rotary or the Lions Club or the Boy Scouts, right? You can't get Freemasonry from clandestine lodges. You can only get Freemasonry from actual Masonic lodges. And we put ourselves, we're so humble about ourselves that we sell ourselves so cheap that we kind of shoot ourselves in the foot, because when you sell yourself so cheap, no one wants to take you seriously. And what's easy to get what's easy to get and what's cheap to acquire is easy to drop, and you don't look back. We have to take more pride in what we offer. We have to insist more on the quality of our work. And yes, do we actually need to deliver that? Of course we do. What does that encompass? Nicer buildings, nicer mills, better degrees, better regalia. Just anything you could think of. It needs to level up, but it doesn't happen in a vacuum, and it doesn't happen without money, right? And
oh my goodness! Earlier this week, speaking of regalia, somebody actually told me it's the internal and not the external when I said we shouldn't have ratty regalia. That I wasn't a fan of the soap on the rope.
soap on a rope.
Soap on a rope kind of collars, which they're not even collars.
Yeah.
And somebody got on to me because it's the internal and not the external.
It makes me think of oh gosh, the early Knights Templar. Yeah, what were they called? Like the poor knights. I don't remember what they were like they would two of them would ride a horse because they're supposed to be so poor and like they wore like these
Right.
uncomfortable.
Right.
I mean, dang, why don't we all just do that? We'll just show up in lodge in pajama pants with flip flops and a white t-shirt. Because we're all supposed to. No, dude, yes.
Make an oath to poverty.
The internal, not the external, was not intended to be an argument to wear rags at lodge and have crappy regalia. That's not what it was intended to. And people have weaponized that as a way to keep us mundane, and we're not a mundane organization.
Right. Yeah, those knights took a oath of poverty for different reasons.
Yeah.
Than what we're doing today. Hold on just a second. I got my one of my old bylaws from years ago, and I'm going to look for the dues on here real quick. So go ahead and keep talking.
Read some comments while you're doing that. So
Yeah,
Bob Naylor says, Justin, we compete with social clubs like Rotary, even though we're ill-equipped to be a decent social club. The mysteries are totally lost in most lodges today. I don't know that I'm going to respectfully disagree that we compete simply because of time. And what I mean by that is I've been a member of Rotary. I've been a Lion. They don't meet the same time we do, right? They're a day club. We're more of an eating club traditionally. Financially, I don't even think they compete. Both of them are pretty cheap organizations from my experience. I'm not saying they all are, just like not all lodges are cheap. So I do think that they could be looked at competition, but it's like you say there, it's like comparing apples and oranges. It's a totally different thing. We are not them, and they are not us. They cannot offer what we should be able to offer, and frankly, we shouldn't offer what they do. We shouldn't try to be the charitable organization that the Lions Club is, right? Because that's what it was intended for. That's just my opinion. As far as the mysteries being lost, Caesar says the mysteries are lost. I don't think they're lost. I don't think they can ever really be lost. I think we can lose sight of them. I think you can have so few people actually being seekers that we can lose sight of it. But I don't know that the mysteries can ever go away. I think the mysteries themselves are universal across cultures. They might have different names and they might look different to different people, but I think the mysteries are there. We just have to get back to be willing to explore those things. Yeah, some of them are actively in search of them, but they're doing well. I agree. Bob Nato says we compete in the sense that they're trying to get out in the community rather than offering a great product inside the lodge rooms. Yeah, I agree. I do agree with that. And I've always said I firmly believe that if you want to grow your lodge, if you want to be healthy and have activity in your lodge, people vote with their feet. You do stop focusing on what's going outside your lodge and focus on providing value inside your lodge. Quit wringing your hands about the people who don't show up and provide actual value for those that do. And if you can provide value for people that do show up and give them the reason to keep coming back, more people will keep coming and you will grow your lodge. You still looking?
Yeah, the calculator that I could find was only back to 1913. Give me just 1 second.
Yeah, those can be hard. Deb McLean says the mysteries aren't going anywhere. It's just up to those who wish to pursue them. Yeah, I mean, I got a copy of Secret Teachings of All Ages in this desk behind me. That's not the end all, but my point is there's plenty of content out there that they won't spell out the mysteries for you. Secret Teachings says to spell it out, but the trailheads are there, if that makes sense. Like the signs that say go this way exist. They're still there. It's just up to us to actually start going down those trailheads, start following those paths, and going into those rabbit holes where it leads us. Just too many of us don't, because we've been so caught up in this superficial Freemasonry, this mundane Freemasonry that is prevalent everywhere, and we have to be willing to fight, kind of like we did in January. We have to be willing to fight for what we expect out of our fraternity in our lodges, and say, look, we have to have education. We have to grow. We have to grow our educational programs. We have to actually provide value and content for our brothers.
Okay, I got some numbers. These
Okay.
are real numbers. In this bylaw book from 1852, the dues were $10. Okay, for inflation from 1852 to today, $10 equates to $393. Dollar a day, bud. Dollar a day.
Nice.
So, in our little town of 1,900 people, which was probably more like 300 back in 1852,
Mhm.
the dues were $393 a year. Now, the initiation fee, the degree fees. So that was $10 going all the way to $393. The degree fees were $25 each degree. So the equivalent would be
Wow.
$983 per degree to become a Master Mason in 1852.
So, wow, and that's in Little old Goliad, Texas, like you said.
In little old Goliad,
And
freaking Texas.
didn't you say that the lodge bet on the second floor, like, wasn't it rented out the bottom floor at some point, or was it a school or something?
We still rent out the part of the bottom floor.
So that's even with
We used to rent it out to City Hall.
nice.
The picture you see at Grand Lodge is a picture of our lodge with the sign that says City Hall on it.
Yeah.
And I don't know that we even rented it to them. We probably just let them use it since we could afford everything back then.
Yeah. So Jason, the Reichenberg, made a comment. I know he's joking, but I think this is important to address. He says, "Are you knocking blue collar Freemasonry?"
I sure am.
There's no such thing as blue collar Freemasonry. It's just Freemasonry. It's just Freemasonry. Now people may try to turn it into something mundane, but in my mind, there is no such thing as blue collar Freemasonry.
Exactly. So
if you're
I am knocking that term. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. It's just Freemasonry. It's not because we're not for blue collar or white collar. We're for good men. And
Right.
trying to take that approach and apply it to your Freemasonry, you can't do that. You can't shape Freemasonry into something it's not. I'm sorry. Just my thoughts on that. Dang, there was something else I wanted to hit on. Oh, since we're talking about education stuff anyway, we kind of gone in that direction. I gave a talk at Faith Lodge yesterday. Really good talk. I enjoyed it. Good turnout. One of the questions that was asked me is, what kind of education should you offer for your lodge? And I'll tell you what I said, and I'd love to hear your thought, Dennis. But it really, I said there's two answers. You have to know the lodge, right? And you have to be willing to offer a variety. You have to know your audience and be willing to offer a variety. And what I mean by that is there's some lodges out there that can really go real deep into like Kabbalion, right? Something like Kabbalah, right? And that is the perfect environment to have those conversations, and you'll get feedback, you'll get questions, you'll have conversations after, right? If I go to Blum, Texas, with like 200 people in the town, and go give a presentation over Kabbalah, it's going to be a very different reception than it would be at one of those more esoteric lodges, right? Am I suggesting that you shouldn't have esoteric stuff as part of the variety? That's not what I'm suggesting at all. But you need to know your audience. Some people are going to enjoy history more. Some people are going to enjoy like the administrative, like how we should be doing things. Some people enjoy the esoteric side. You should have a variety. As far as how deep you go, it really depends on your audience. Because if you go like real deep into the cardinal virtues and how they're related to tarot and things like that, that's probably not going to be a good introduction to esoteric Freemasonry for your rancher that is your brother, right? And so knowing your audience, offering a variety, and also being respectful of what other people's interests are, just because I might not be interested in history, but this guy might be. And so we're going to present over history this month. Next month, that might be something I'm more interested in. But we have to be willing to let other people get what they want out of the education. And we also have to be willing to understand that I may not think I'm interested in this, but I may be wrong. I may still grow just from this. What are your thoughts, Tim?
I ask every lodge exactly. I ask them what they think their lodge needs to hear. Mm-hmm. And I emphasize what you think the lodge needs to hear. And the reason why is because I can go into a lodge and I can get people upset with me, and it's not going to hurt my feelings one single bit.
Yeah.
I'm okay telling them talking about what the brothers think is needed going forward that everybody's afraid to talk about. Mm-hmm. So sometimes it is administrative, but usually I kick in some esoteric knowledge to drive that thought home, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
I try to incorporate the teachings of the degrees with the lessons we need to learn ourselves in today's world. So I turn it into layman's terms so that we can apply it into today's world with what we've got going on. And I think if we do that, we will never do our lodge wrong. You know, the lessons do teach us to be prudent. They do teach us to be like bees and work together as a collective for the betterment of the whole, right? You know, us as individuals, we're to work together for the betterment of the whole. And when we all do our job, that creates harmony within our lodge and within our communities. And so I think that it's important that we get feedback from the people who are asking us to speak and speak on those topics and really drive it home with the ritual backing it up. Mm-hmm. It's kind of like what happened at Grand Lodge. The reason why it was successful is because we backed up everything we said with lodge laws, mm-hmm. Grand Lodge laws, the Constitution. And if we hadn't done that, it would have been a bunch of people just talking about their feelings and this and that, and everybody would have gotten booed off the stage, right? But because we backed it up with the actual laws that proved our point, that point was well taken, received, and it went to our favor because we were prepared. It's the same thing with our lodges. We need to prepare our introduction to these values and beliefs, but have it all based on the degrees.
Yeah.
Challenge your lodges, but do it with the work. Mm-hmm. Don't challenge it based off feelings. Challenge it with the work.
Yeah. If Masonry, I'm reading a comment, if Masonry actually helped people improve their own lives, that would be a real improvement. Do what we say we do. Yeah. I agree.
Well, I think it has helped me improve my life, mm-hmm. but I've also forced it to that. You know, I traveled. When I wasn't getting it, I traveled to get the Freemasonry I wanted. And, you know, lo and behold, the bringing the things back to our lodge, the brothers of today are using those things that we learned, and then have just built upon it, and now our lodge is doing freaking phenomenal.
Yeah.
So I had to travel but I brought it back to my lodge to, and not necessarily as presentations to the lodge either. You're not the hero in your own town,
Mm-hmm.
but brothers saw what I was doing, saw the impact that it was making around Texas and other jurisdictions, and they said, you know what, we want that Freemasonry. We want that Masonry in our lodge.
Yep.
And here we are, and they're doing phenomenal.
Cool.
They have made the lodge a place where other people want to come to take ideas back to their lodge, if that makes sense.
Makes sense, man. Let's go into final thoughts.
Well, if you take those numbers, $10 and $25, brothers,
Mm-hmm.
take those numbers with the inflation calculator and pull up your, see if you can get a count of your lodge members and separate them between your dues paying and currently living, dues paying and endowments. And the endowments don't need to be currently living, but for dues paying, it has to be, well, I mean, it would only be in current. Well, anyways, so take those numbers and apply them to your roster with your lodge. Everyone is different. Ours, I think we have like 80 members in Goliad. And I would be willing to say that a good 1/3 to half are endowed. And so if you plug in those inflation numbers, $393 per unit, per dues paying member, and then think about how many people you have in the pipeline right now. It shows you in your lodge information. It shows you who's all in the pipeline. Add the degree fees to those members, or those soon to be members once they become masters, and look at what kind of difference you would see in your own lodge.
Mm-hmm.
Just take those numbers that I gave, $10 and $25. Now it's $393 and $980, and apply that to your lodge and see where you stand. Brothers, there's a science to it, but it's not rocket science, and it can be done with pencil and paper, simple math.
Mm-hmm.
It's not difficult at all to grasp this thing. And if it is difficult, if it's too difficult for somebody to understand, then you've made it way more difficult than it needs to be.
Yep.
Because simple math is all it takes to figure out where you need to be and what you need to get in your lodge. I feel bad for Josh because, he's one of the officers of my lodge that's going to have to deal with the fact that dues haven't been raised since my year. And those are real concerns. Even though we're making new Masons every year, we make several a year, it's still not where it needs to be for us to be a healthy, thriving lodge, mm-hmm. to where we don't worry when the AC breaks. We don't worry if the roof were to collapse. We wouldn't worry if we need a new stove or refrigerator or AC unit or something like that. The difference would be phenomenal. We applied those numbers and looked to see where we were after that.
Yep, I agree.
And I feel bad that I have not pushed harder to help you guys with that change, Josh. I apologize. I really do. But I'm going to be around more, and every time somebody says something, say, well, I wouldn't have thought about it if Dennis hadn't said it. And then they're all going to hate me and not you guys. So I'm okay. I can carry that burden. But, all you brothers out there that are dealing with these issues, I know it's very sensitive. And people are afraid of pricing themselves out of contention, right? So they're afraid that you're going to raise the dues up and the degrees to a standard that people won't be able to meet, and then you won't be making any more Masons and this and that. Well, when I joined, I knew what I wanted. I knew it was time for me to join, and I would have paid whatever they were asking. I've had people tell me that's all it costs to become a Mason.
Mm-hmm.
And they're just flabbergasted. And I kind of felt the same way. I didn't know any better. No, I thought that, but the lodge, my mother lodge is very solid, but still, I would have paid whatever it took because I knew I wanted to be a Master Mason, and a certain amount of prestige and honor comes with that title. We're not title seekers, but in a way we are, because we know we're getting into something to make ourselves better. If we didn't see that value in it, we would never go to do it. We would never go to do it. Freemasonry is unmistakably its own baby. There's not another organization that is the same. And, even though people in the Elks Club like to think that they are close, not even close.
David Lawson says he may email you with some bylaws questions, if that's all right.
Oh, sure.
If
Go
you
right
get to
ahead.
come up.
Happy to help. Happy to help. But to wrap it up, we love you. We're only saying these things because we should be addressing these things every year. If any of you brothers want to talk to me about the thoughts that we put into motion earlier about a good idea of how to do your bylaws and rules and regulations, don't hesitate to reach out.
Mm-hmm.
That's what we're here for.
Absolutely.
We understand that you're on it. We understand that. That's why you're listening, because you need a little bit of an extra boost to get you to that next stated meeting, right? And we're here to support you. That's what we're here for, is to help you. It's not just to toot our own horns. So with all that being said, we love you. Thank you for watching, and keep it between the points.
Well, I never gave my final thoughts. What are you trying to do?
Well, you should have. You should have. I
was like, well, he's going to jump into it. I guess we'll just let him.
I'm the one who ends this deal.
I was thinking as you were talking, and it's something we probably should have mentioned that we didn't. Freemasonry doesn't belong in a bargain bin, right? We're not some cheap throwaway organization. If you watch this video, or if you're already thinking about dues, and say you take the formula that we give, and you go home and you crunch all the numbers, and you say, okay, dues need to be X amount. Don't just show up at your next meeting and say, hey, I want to raise our dues, because you're not gonna get buy-in at all. You have to educate your brothers, educate them. Excuse me a second.
Sometimes it takes time.
It does take time. Put together a presentation. Show what your operating costs are. Show how many dues paying members you have. And show mathematically, hey, this is why we need to have our dues here. This is where it will put us. If you have your old bylaws, show what the dues were. Show what your degree fees used to be. Show what they would be today. Right? Put history on your side. But educate your brothers. If you just go in there and say, hey, I think we need to change our dues to $500, I'm making the motion, we start the process. It's not going to happen, man. It just is not going to happen. But if you say, hey, this is why we need to, this is why we should raise our dues, this is the number I come up with, here's the math, this is why the math supports it. Historically, let's look at why this is good. Boom, boom, boom. You actually have a foundation you can build off now. And I would even say don't even make a motion the first time. Here's the education. Think about it. I'm going to make a motion next month, right? Let them know that it's something that you didn't do this for fun. You're going to move forward with it, but give them time to think about it. Don't just throw them under the bus that first day, right? Give them the education. Let them know you're going to make the motion, start the process, whatever you have to do at your lodge. Give them time to ask you questions. Give them time to think about it. Yes. Yeah, go ahead.
Something I was thinking. I just wanted to see the hand raised.
Oh, I never got
something I was thinking about as you were saying that,
mm-hmm.
is that because it takes time, if you get a lot of flack when you present this to the lodge and you give them the numbers and they're still, oh hell no, then say, okay, well here's what I present. From this day forward, I would like to make a motion that the treasurer supply a profit and loss statement every month. Not just saying we collected this and spent this and that, but a profit and loss that we can determine where we're at any given point in the month. That should be given to the lodge every month. That should be visible to the lodge. And then once we do that, let's see how viable our current system is working. Then let's make that decision. If you need the buy-in and they just throw you out like the old dishwater, then do that. Say, okay, then I make a motion that the treasurer supply us with a profit and loss every month. Because if they can't do that, they're not doing their job as a treasurer.
Yeah. Austin Berry says, good night, brothers. David and Devin will see y'all Tuesday. What's going on Tuesday? They talking about you?
David and Devin, no.
See y'all
Tuesday.
Oh, I'm sorry. He says David and Devin, I'll see y'all Tuesday. I read it wrong. I was like, oh, what's going on Tuesday?
I was going to say, I'll be at Lodge down in Corpus. We've got Corpus 189 tomorrow night, and then Tuesday night we've got Oso Lodge number 1286.
Cool. Next time we meet, I want to talk a little bit about. I don't want to give away. Well, I guess I didn't want to because I'm not going to probably give it to the lodge. I want to talk about the presentation I gave at Faith Lodge because I think it will. I think it's good just for this year. So maybe our next live or maybe our next just you and I we'll talk about that because I think it's timely for 2024. But other than that, thank y'all. If you feel like you're an all-on island, be sure you reach out to myself or Dennis and keep it between the points.
And I'm almost ready to turn in my manuscript for my book.
Oh, cool, man. How many pages are you at?
300.
300. Nice, man. Very cool.
That's trimmed down. That's trimmed way down.